Hey guys, that mom here. So welcome to my sleep series. Today we're going to be talking about newborn sleep. When I say newborn, I am talking about that first stage in development right after your baby is born. We're looking at 0 to 3 months or 0 to 12 weeks, however you want to look at it. It's commonly referred to as the fourth trimester. Doctors and pediatricians coined this term so that you would start to think of this stage of development as just being an extension of your pregnancy. While your baby no longer resides in your womb, similar to your pregnancy, they are still 100% dependent on you. Your baby is dependent on you in this stage of development for food, warmth, comfort, and even sleep. It is very, very normal for your child to still need to be parented to sleep throughout this entire stage of development. So that's going to be things like maybe holding them, rocking them, cradling them, bouncing them, nursing them, to help them unwind and learn to go to sleep. It's not expected for a child to be able to put themselves to sleep during this stage of development. Well, what does sleep look like for a newborn? We all know that I have an affection for Dr. Sears. I really like the way he lays things out. So I have always used the sleep chart that he has on his website. While they vary, these numbers vary a little bit website to website, they're pretty much the same. So I've just stuck to Dr. Sears because I like him as a resource. And a newborn, according to Dr. Sears, should be getting between 14 and 18 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. Like I said, other websites vary a little. Some say up to 19 hours, so 15 to 19. But Dr. Sears says between 14 and 18, give or take a little. This is really important for your baby to get all of this sleep. Like I mentioned in my intro, sleep is really important for a baby's learning. So things like memory and language development. It's important for their moods to be good and stable. Everyone wants a happy, cheerful baby. And it's important for their growth because they produce that human growth hormone predominantly while they're sleeping. And a sleep-deprived baby will be more inclined to obesity later in life. So getting the proper amount of sleep are really, really important. I know it's sometimes easier said than done, but this is really what you should be striving for. 14 to 18 hours in a 24-hour period. That last part is something that takes a little getting used to. Thinking of your days in full 24-hour periods as opposed to just the waking hours that we may be used to thinking of our day. So I know before I had Q, for me, when I would think of my day, I would be like, okay, my day started at 6 a.m., ended at 11 p.m. I really only ever viewed my waking hours. For a baby, because especially in this newborn phase, they don't really care day or night or day. They just work on a 24-hour clock. So I've mentioned before how I like to log everything. I have an app where I track everything. In my app, our day begins at midnight and ends at 11:59 p.m. And so I just track for a full 24 hours. So even if Q goes to bed at, let's say, 7 p.m., I will track 7 p.m. to 11:59 as the end of one day, and 12 to, let's say, 2 when she wakes up for her feeding as the beginning of the next. And I just track for a full 24 hours. In those 24 hours for your newborn, they'll be getting 14 to 18 hours of sleep. If you are at all like me, you're probably stoked to hear this because that sounds like it's a lot of sleep. But here's the catch. Of course, in a newborn, that does not happen all at once, or even in that big of chunks for that matter. Your baby, and this is really important, and this is probably one of the things that people are either the least informed about or just misinformed about. In this fourth trimester, the first 3 months of a child's life, their sleep will be essentially just naps. A nap can be anywhere from one sleep cycle. A newborn sleep cycle is 50 minutes long. So from the time that they enter into that light sleep and deep sleep and back around to light, is about 50 minutes. Or it can be as long as 3 hours. That part is what's really important. Your newborn, before 3 months of age, so 0 to 3 months, 0 to 12 weeks, should not be sleeping any longer than 3 hours. That information that you get about never wake a sleeping baby is absolutely wrong. It is important that your baby at least wake every 3 hours in this stage of development to eat. The reason why that is their tummies are tiny, 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 and they digest food really quickly. And so it's important that they be eating every 3 hours. You don't want their blood sugar to drop. You don't want them to get dehydrated. I know moms get really excited when maybe they have a 2-month-old baby that slept for 6 hours, but that can actually be potentially very dangerous. Babies have been hospitalized for getting dehydrated from not eating enough. Blood sugar can drop and it can cause a lot of problems. So as much as you might want more than 3 hours of sleep at a time, it is really important. Set an alarm, because if your baby's not up after 3 hours from the beginning of their last feeding, you need to wake them up and you need to feed them. So really, when you have a newborn, your baby's just going to be taking a series of naps that could be anywhere between 15 minutes and 3 hours long. How frequently these naps happen is also important. You don't want your baby awake for too long. If your baby is awake for too long, you run the risk of them getting overtired and overstimulated. That whole concept of if you keep your child up longer, they'll get really, really tired and sleep longer does not apply to babies. As a matter of fact, the opposite can be true. If you keep your baby up too long and they become overtired and overstimulated, it can be harder for them to shut down their mind, shut down their body, and get into a good, deep, restorative sleep. Think about how it can be really hard for you to sleep after a really exciting day or before an exciting day. If you're really amped up, it's hard for you to settle down. That's what can happen to a baby when they get overtired and overstimulated. So your baby should be napping anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. So if your baby wakes up at 12, they should be going back to sleep somewhere between 12:30 and 1:15. If your baby isn't getting back to sleep after about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, you should consider trying to make the environment more conducive for sleep. While it's great for a baby to learn to sleep in noise and some distractions, because it's not always easy to have a perfectly quiet house, if your baby is struggling to get those naps in with things going on, you're going to want to make the environment more conducive to sleep. So pretty much, just to recap, your newborn baby, so your baby, when they are first born up until they are 3 months old, should be getting 14 to 18 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. That sleep is going to look like a series of naps, day and night and day. They cannot differentiate at this point. Naps anywhere between 50 minutes to 3 hours in length, no longer before they get up to sleep. And the nap should be taking place every 30 to an hour and 15 minutes. And that is your life. If you're anything like me, this is news to you. Before I had Q, I did not know any of this. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was pregnant, I would see, other friends of mine had already had babies, and I would watch whenever they would post anything about their child's sleep. And so I would see people saying, oh, my 10-week-old decided to celebrate by sleeping 10 hours, and my 12-week-old slept 12 hours. And I was like, sweet, I can absolutely do that. And it wasn't until I took my infant care classes during my pregnancy that I learned how dangerous that can be. So I was a little devastated initially to learn some of these things, but honestly, at the end of the day, I want to do what is the absolute safest for my daughter. If you've watched my other videos, you know my stance that yes, it may have worked for some people and their child turned out just fine, but I am not one who is willing to take the risk, because what if it doesn't work out for me? What if I get my baby to sleep the 10 hours and it results in them getting very dehydrated or their blood sugar dropping or something else happening? It's just not worth the risk. At the end of the day, this stage of development is so short in the grand scheme of both yours and your baby's life. 3 months is nothing, and you can do anything for 3 months. And I know, because hello, I'm a mom, I know when you're in those 3 months, it feels like time is standing still. And particularly when you get to that 2-month phase where now the sleep deprivation is more than you can handle and you are just desperate for sleep, you're going to want to push it. And I get it. It doesn't feel easy when you're in it, but I can promise you when you get past it, it really, you realize how short of a period of time it really is. So it's just not worth it to take the risk, at least not in my opinions. Like I said, Day and night, night and day. Your newborn is not going to know the difference. They have no circadian rhythm at this point. They're spending these 3 months trying to develop that. So some important things that you can do to help them develop it would be having a good routine. Not that you would necessarily expect your newborn, nor should you expect your newborn to follow a routine. Having, like, let's say a bedtime routine where keeping in mind that one day your newborn is going to be older, so you might want to instill some habits in them now. Having like a bedtime routine where you go in and you put on the pajamas and the lights are down low and you're sending the signs that, hey, the day is done. We're moving into nighttime, and having everything about the nighttime environment be different than what their daytime environment was. And then when morning time comes, open up the blinds, kick on the lights, and now it's day. Have your house be bright. Have a lot of the blinds open to really help them start to differentiate between night and day. Like I said, having a routine is important. This is funny because it's something that I kind of just accidentally learned. For the first 3 months of Q's life, she pretty much just napped wherever we were. So in the evening time, that was out in our living room on the couch while we watched Mad Men and did our thing. She would nap out there with us, and it wasn't until 11, when we wanted to come in and do our bedtime, that we would change her into her pajamas. And the bedtime routine for Daddy and I was, we came in, we got on our pajamas, we brushed our teeth, we turned on a little bit of mindless television like Big Bang. I would normally nurse Q, we would swaddle her up, and we would put her to bed, and we would go to bed. I didn't even realize that my baby was picking up on this until she was like 3.5 months old, and I decided I wanted to implement a bedtime that was separate from ours. And I tried putting her to bed at, let's say, like 8, and she was completely thrown off. And I think it's because it wasn't the bedtime routine that she was used to. So I kind of had to retrain her. So really implementing a bedtime routine when your child is young, even though they're not really going to be following it, sets them up for success later. Some tips that were given to me, I'll be honest, I wasn't really able to use these. Daddy had to go back to work and couldn't really be of much help to me with the late night feedings. Thankfully, I am a stay-at-home mom, so it was easier for me to be up all night than it was for him. So I've always done all the nighttime feedings. But some of the things that were recommended is, if you know that your child's going to be eating every 3 hours, let's say they have a 9 p.m. feeding. You as a mom do the 9 p.m. feeding. And then, your baby goes to sleep to take a nap, you go to sleep. Pump and have a bottle ready for the baby for their 12 o'clock feeding. And you go to sleep and let Daddy do the 12 o'clock feeding. And then you don't have to wake up again until that 3 a.m. feeding. So you just got 6 uninterrupted hours of sleep if you can tag team with Daddy. If you don't have, if Dad's not necessarily in the picture, hopefully you have some other support, like maybe a mom or something, or a sister, or even a best friend who wouldn't mind coming and helping you during this stage. Tag team it. Don't feel like you necessarily have to do every feeding. But like I said, I will say I've always done every night feeding. Daddy had to go to work, and so I needed him to be functioning, especially when he's driving in Dallas traffic, and I've done it all, and it was rough for the first 3 months, but then it gets easier, so you can do it. So I've already told you how kind of setting up a good circadian rhythm for them for later development is important. Having a routine is also important. One of the things that I would probably advise, just because had I kept this in mind when Q was a newborn, it would have made things easier down the line. But additionally, I see a lot in my mommy groups, moms having to deal with some struggles as their child gets older because they didn't do this. Keep in mind that while your newborn is exactly that, it is a newborn and 100% dependent on you. You're going to be putting it to sleep. You're going to be providing it with everything. At some point, that newborn will be an older baby, will be a toddler, will be a child in school, you will be a teenager. You are really setting the foundation for their sleep and their behavior at a really, really young age. Fortunately, Daddy and I kind of inadvertently had thought of this because we knew that we weren't ever going to co-sleep. Even before I knew how unsafe it was and all that, I knew that we weren't ever going to do it, predominantly because I did not want to have a toddler one day that was used to sleeping in my bed. It's fine if you want to. We just knew we didn't want that for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, Daddy works. I can't have a kid who is keeping him up all night. He's kind of a light sleeper to begin with. Two, we plan on having more than one kid and I don't want a million kids in my bed. Three, when they become school age, I need them getting a good sound sleep. Their bedtime is going to be much earlier than mine always. I can't have them dependent on sleeping in my bed. And so we knew we weren't going to co-sleep. We have set those standards from an early age. I see a lot in my mom's group where moms who have always co-sleep, when a second baby comes around and you can't have more than one bed share, or when the time just comes, it's getting too difficult to continue to bed share, that they have a really hard time transitioning, let's say a 3 or 4-year-old that has only ever slept in your bed, into their own. So just think, I only used co-sleeping as an example just because it popped in my brain. There are a lot of other things. For instance, sleeping your baby in a swing. You're not going to be able to sleep your baby in a swing forever. Do not get them used to that at such a young age. It's going to be very hard to break as they get older. Even sleeping your baby in those rock and plays, like that are kind of like reclined, unless you plan on having your kids sleep in a recliner their whole life, you're setting yourself up for having a challenge down the road. Keep in mind that everything you're teaching your baby, even in this earliest stage of development, is going to transition into these later stages. So keep that in mind. While you are going through this stage of development, like I had mentioned, you're going to get to the phase, it's going to be around 2 months, where your baby is seeming a little older. They seem like they'd be really capable of sleeping more than they are. You're going to start to read and see things about sleep training, and it's going to be really easy to want to fall into the trap of trying to train your 2-month-old to sleep deeper and longer than they are designed to do. Dr. Sears has this really great article on his website where he talks all about, newborn sleep and how it differs from adult sleep and, different parenting tips. And one of the things that he highlights is research supports the fact that a newborn sleep cycle is as short as it is, with that 50 minutes, as a survival skill. So what happens when any of us go through a sleep cycle? You have the light sleep into deep sleep, back into light sleep. When you're in this light sleep, it's very easy for you to wake up. For adults and even older babies and children, your sleep cycle is longer. In a newborn, it's only about 50 minutes from the time that they first fall asleep, light sleep, deep sleep, back into light. This is really important because when they get into that light sleep, they're very easily aroused and wake up. So if your baby is, let's say, cold and needs warmth, or vice versa, they're hot and are overheating, or your baby's airway is blocked, it's really common for their nose to get stuffed and need to be, sucked out. Or if they're hungry, like I said, they have tiny, tiny tummies. Your baby's sleep cycle is nice and short. That way they can wake up before it becomes a dangerous thing and request help via crying, obviously. So don't try and train your baby to go against what they are hardwired to do. It could be their survival. If you train your baby to ignore their natural instincts and to not ask for help, or if God forbid you're doing some sort of sleep training that has you ignore these signs from them and just teach them to sleep through it could really be dangerous. Like I said, I know that some people do it and have success, but these recommendations are there for a reason. There are obviously people who have had horror stories from this, and you don't want to be one of them. So trust your baby. Let them get used to the world. Give them this time. I promise, even just in the next stage of development, the 3 to 6 month, which we're going to talk about next, there's plenty of opportunity for you to implement some skills to get them more independent, and consequently, you and baby get more sleep in larger blocks. So it'll get easier, I promise. Just hang in there. 14 to 18 hours sleep in a 24-hour period. The naps are anywhere between 50 minutes and 3 hours long. Those naps should be taking place every 30 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. And it's going to be that way day, night, night, and day. Do not mess up with their survival skills. Your baby's waking for a reason. Be there. This is a short period of time. I know if you're in this, I know it doesn't feel that way, but I promise you it is, and it really gets easier. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch more, check out one of my other videos and subscribe to my page. I'm also really active on other social media outlets, so please follow me on Instagram and Twitter. You can click on the links on my page or search me using @officialthatmom. Thank you again so much for watching, and always remember, don't be afraid to be that mom. I'll see you next time. Bye.